So how did you and Raya Martin decide just to make a film together?
It was decided for us in a way. The genesis of the project was there's a film festival in Copenhagen called CPH Docs. And they have a program which is a Docs Lab where they put two filmmakers together, one from the first world, one from the third world. And I think they asked Raya to do it a few times and he always refused for various reasons. It's also, I think also one of the things was the notion of putting two people together who don't know each other. That's what they normally do. And normally it doesn't work out very well, frankly.
Oh, really?
From what I've seen. No, I mean, you try imagine making a film with somebody else you don't know, you never met.
What are some of the ones that have been made in that? I know Nico did one.
Yeah, Nico did one with a Danish director
I haven't seen
last
it yet.
year, which is good.
Yeah.
But anyhow, when Raya decided he wanted to do it finally, I did some stuff with him last year or the year before in the Great Cinema Party. And we talked at some point about doing something together, maybe if he ever wanted to do something together. And then he agreed to do this, and then I said, well, I can do it. I have a European residency, so I'm legally allowed to do this. And we talked to the woman from Copenhagen, and she's like, well, normally it's, the idea is different people who don't know each other. But I guess, we'll check it over, and they agreed that we did it. And then, also Raya didn't want to do the lab at all, so we spent the festival in Copenhagen working on the idea for the film, or the screenplay, if you will, the outline. And then we met again, continued stuff over Skype, then met again about a month later, and then we shot in December. So, and I think that, the other thing you should know is that this grant that they give is very, very small. It's only, I think, 13,600 euros. So, for some reason, we stupidly decided to go and make this thing in Mexico, and all the money went basically getting us there and housing us, and the rest is just continuing to drop out of my bank account on a daily basis.
Who had the idea to do the remake? Where did that come from?
Well, initially, Raya's idea to do something about the apocalypse in Mexico. It's a documentary film festival, and the film, I think, has lots of documentary elements to it. And the festival is also really good with mixing fiction and documentary. They were one of the first to sort of put these sort of the hybrid film and also documentaries and fiction on the same level of each other, which I appreciate. But the thought process was, so this thing's going to happen in December. The end of the world is going to happen. So suddenly you say, okay, well, what do people think about the end of the world thing? They think things like, what's the last meal I'm going to eat, which is also coincidentally how we got that stuff in there too. Where would you be at the last day if you knew the world was going to end? Who would you be with? And if you're a filmmaker or you're a film fan, maybe you think, what's the last film you're going to watch at the end of the world? And then I took it a step further. I said, well, then what's the film you would want to remake at the end of the world? And I said, well, logically, it would be the last movie because it's called The Last Movie. And I'm like, well, actually, this could work somehow. And Raya was a fan of The Last Movie also. And so then we thought about it for a while. And then I also came across The American Dreamer, which is the documentary about the editing of The Last Movie. And so combining these aspects also sort of heightened the fiction documentary collision that's going on in the film. But the film isn't really a remake of The Last Movie. It's got some elements. It's more of I'd say a gentle homage to both of those. A cover, maybe a remix, maybe a Kanye-like remix. But and then once we had that idea, we decided we wanted to use some actors as well, and we wanted a filmmaker to be the filmmaker. And I think through Nico, I thought Gabino would be great for his sort of his whatever Sancho Panza to his Don Quixote. And then, we managed to get them for a very short amount of time because they were both busy with other projects. Alex was working on this HBO thing, and Gabino does theater in Mexico a lot, experimental theater. And they could make it down there and, very generously agreed to come and do it. And we just sort of went with it. We sort of we remade the character a bit to suit Alex from what we had at the beginning. But I think he did a great job.
What were those changes?
At certain points we're thinking about maybe not using an American filmmaker. That's the big thing is once you have an American and you put them in this situation in Mexico, then you can't help but deal with issues of colonial guilt or however you want to put it. We didn't really want that to be the focus of the film, and a lot of people are reacting to that part of the film in a way which is stronger than I thought they would. The scene in Chichen Itza is a provocative thing to include, and I think it works in interesting ways, but anyhow, yeah. And also, knowing Alex personally, And having seen his films and having known him, you have to tailor things in a certain way to meet the person. Gabino was pretty much free. We could do whatever we wanted with him. He was easy. Alex was a bit more difficult, but I knew he'd be a little difficult. That's okay.
Did you work into the fact that what films he has made, like the intertext, because it's an intertextual film, you kind of have to know that.
Like Alex's films?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't really a consideration.
It might be for him when he's realizing that he's playing like a version of himself, and people are wondering.
Well, I mean, he also not just for himself. I mean, he was into the into the opera thing. He loved his last movie.
Yeah.
Other '70s westerns. He's a much bigger cinephile than I am. He spent whatever 10 years working at Kim's in New York, and knows he sees movies. All he does is sees movies. Alex, he just goes to watch 35mm prints. That's basically it's where he's most at home. More than me, I'm most at home in bed, I think.
Were you taking cues from westerns, apart from the qualities in the last movie, like the westerns that it was referencing, even?
A little. I mean, the thing about the last movie, it was originally supposed to be shot in Mexico, and I think there was some problem because I think the government didn't like the script, the way that he was treating the natives. But he got the idea for shooting. Lots of westerns were made in Mexico, obviously, and Hopper shot The Sons of Katie Elder with John Wayne in Mexico. I forget in which part of Mexico. I think they did most of that near Durango. So like the scene where Gabino was talking about John Wayne, we felt that he had told that story before on the set at some point, and that when we were in this situation and them walking and we knew we were shooting on film, and we said, okay, I think you should talk about that John Wayne story now. That's one thing. We watched some Peck and Paw. Which Peck and Paw? I don't remember. Billy Kid. We watched some Monty Hellman. The films we watched before, a few of it. And there's also the Pasolini film about location scouting in Palestine.
Oh yeah.
For Gospel Court of St. Matthew. That we both watched. We watched. I always can't pronounce it. The William Greaves film, Symbioso.
Plasm, I think so. Yeah.
And we actually had this idea also, that sort of comes through maybe in the campfire scene. We also had this idea maybe we would, at a certain point, let the crew have a discussion about the film, because I think everybody was pretty much confused during the entire making of the film. But we never did that. There's lots of films besides westerns too that are in there, like Apocalypse Now. There's some very blatant Apocalypse Now homages, but when you're shooting, Raya has a shot which he calls his La Cienega shot, which I won't say what it is, but if you've seen La Cienega or you've seen our film, you probably can figure out what it is. I guess there's a Leviathan homage, you could say. There is when Alex kicks the jail, I'm sure he did the door of the jail. I'm sure he did that because of the Master. The tracking shot into the strip club is definitely a Boogie Nights homage. I could go on, but it's not. There's more to it than just the other films. Yeah, and a lot of it, I'm sure, is subconscious too.
So, what is apart from the subconscious, what is the practical division of labor when you're shooting between you and Raya?
Well, initially we had this. The concept initially was that he was mostly dealing with the film camera. Him and Jim, their DP, who also shot other films with Raya. And he was a filmmaker in his own right, a really good filmmaker. And I was dealing with the camera assistant who had the main digital camera, which was an AF-100. And Raya was also shooting on a Canon SLR, and I was shooting with iPhone and GoPro. And I was mostly dealing with the actors. That was sort of the initial concept, because he felt less comfortable dealing with the actors. But then that all sort of got scrambled up a bit, depending on what was going on, depending on the mood. Sometimes I get pissed off, and then he had to deal with the actors. Sometimes he gets pissed off, I deal with 16. I also have a hard time looking through a viewfinder because I have glasses. But some of the 16 stuff, some of the 16 shots I set up, like the one at the museum, those 2 shots outside the museum. And I mean, sometimes the DP, basically had freedom to shoot whatever he wanted. Also, it depended on the scene, really, and it was totally chaotic too. We only shot for 7.5 days. And had to, do like 3 locations a day. We also had no lights, so we didn't shoot anything at night, just the bar scene, which is a bar that we created ourselves. It was totally a
Oh.
shambles, it was empty. So I mean, like, you'd have to ask. We have to go day by day or scene by scene.
Yeah,
But it was, and by the end though, we were also. I think that we found a certain rhythm of freedom too. That we were totally experimenting with lots of stuff. Although, like the end, the red scale stuff at the end is something I think that the DP and Raya decided. I'm not sure who decided it. It wasn't me. It was either Jim or Raya or both of them together to do the red scale. And then once I saw that, when we had the film processed, I thought, well, this is obviously the way to end the film. It also ties together sort of this red motif which runs throughout the film. And the initial shot, you know, the R card at the beginning is the same card from 1971. It's on the last movie, but it's in blue. So we redid it into red, you know, something like that. Just to get back to the references.
You're noticing things when you're editing, and I assume like this red motif was not necessarily programmed from the beginning.
Yeah.
What about the use of the mixed media, like the different formats?
Yeah.
Did you kind of have an idea what that was going to imply in the final film, or was it just something you noticed when you were cutting it or when you were in post?
I mean, obviously, it's not just the formats. It's that, you know, some of it's on cameras on tripod. This is most of the time. There's lots of handheld. Obviously, if you're dealing with, you know, Alex is shooting on a handy cam, you know what that's going to relatively look like. But when I watched some of the print today, I still haven't seen the final print, but actually the transfer to 35 really evens things out more than I thought it would. I'm not saying that I haven't seen the whole thing, so I don't know if it's actually, I've only seen the digital version. I have seen the film. I haven't seen our print, which just was finished a few weeks ago. But I mean, I don't know. Obviously, you have a clue. You have some thought if you're shooting on, you know, 8 different cameras that it's not going to look the same.
Yeah.
And but yet we weren't programmatic in what was shot with what camera. And lots of times we were shooting multiple cameras at the same time, multiple cameras in multiple formats at the same time from different angles. Or we didn't do, you know, retakes of many things. We just didn't have the time also. And then editing it, editing it, at a certain point the question was, you know, going with this fiction documentary sort of confusion. You know, there was discussions about maybe having all the film stuff together, but I wanted to separate the film stuff. I thought that, you know, there is sort of a plan whereby most of the first reel is video, him with the handy cam, or also the track behind, the Canon track behind, and they sort of, you know, come out of this tunnel, and then they're transported into this world of cinema where you don't really know what's going on because it's shot on film, but yet they're talking like they were just talking before, but yet the mise en scène is different, and then, you know, you sort of see boom, and then it's sort of, the hardest thing was trying not to go too crazy at the beginning and sort of let the crazy come in, and then when the film starts it gets really crazy. And you asked me the other day about why the interviews at the end. I think maybe that's one of the answers is, you know, it goes crazy, and then also let's just have a stop at the end and pause and get calmed down and try to give some time to settle oneself and to think about what you saw, and also maybe help interpret a little through what he's saying in those interviews at the end. And it was also a question where we do the interviews, because initially we wanted to have them just all at the end, but then we thought it was good to put some at the beginning as sort of a way into the character, which I think helps also.
Do you think the format changes are that crazy? That's something I've been considering, is when the last movie came out, something like that would be considered completely avant-garde. But now, as spectators, are we accustomed enough to like the changes in formats that we
don't care?
Yeah, like it just, well, it doesn't seem as Brechtian or something.
No, obviously not. I don't think so. I don't think that, it's impossible now. I mean, I think that the idea wasn't to necessarily jar people with having different formats in the film. I mean, it's a practical issue too, because it's impossible to shoot it all on film, because if we were to shoot it all on film, we would have run out of film shooting Alex's interviews, because we shot 3 hours of interviews, so we couldn't shoot it all on film. So, but the other thing is I think that maybe it's not too jarring, but what it does do is highlight, I suppose, the qualities of the celluloid image as opposed to the digital image. I think the film, part of the film that's shot on celluloid, I think does stand out from the rest of it. But like an iPhone, for example, an iPhone is shooting, you know, 1080p HD. So how is that different from if you have a steady iPhone and it's lots of daylight. There's shots in there. I'll bet you the people don't know are shot with iPhone, that they could have easily been shot with a regular Panasonic or something like that.
It kind of mirrors the conversations about authenticity in the story, right? Like there's this conversation around what is an authentic image, like which format is the authentic cinema.
Yeah, but the thing also is we're not saying that celluloid is the authentic medium either. That's not the point of the film, I don't think. It's just, it's one among another formats. There's some shots in there that are digital I think look beautiful. To me, I mean, that beauty is something that obviously is subjective, but I wanted to include some digital shots which were good-looking digital shots. I mean, the scene in the cemetery after the rollout, I like those two, the juxtaposition there between the film and the digital, because it's shot at basically the same time, hardly different. Maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes later from when she enters the tomb to when the thing rolls out, and just to be able to see the different qualities, like how much digital picks up, what the digital does, the color of the place, and the film you just have the black and you have the shadows of the crosses which are slowly getting darker just by the second imperceptibly, and also that flash in the middle there, which was completely accidental. I don't know how that flash came in there, but it was there. And then when it cuts, and then all of a sudden you're on this, sort of greenish. It's strange. I like that shot, but I also like the idea that at that point we're literally capturing film dying, because it's there's no more film.
Yeah.
As a guy, camera assistant, like, no more film. And it took me a while when editing it I fought to put that in there, but I didn't even get it until like the fourth or fifth time when I was thinking about it, that this actually encapsulates it right there, because it's like this hysterical moment. The film runs out, we have no more film. What do? We don't get really pissed off and destroy people, yell at each other. We don't yell at the DP, we just sort of laugh about it. Just something else, Of course we ran out of film.
And the sound of film is something that, it's got a pretty rich soundtrack, I have to say, and the sound of film in particular, you pick up on that. You pick up on it in this film, but also not hearing it in other films, or not hearing the projector.
The sound of the projector.
Yeah. But even there's a kind of crackle that almost sounds like a record player.
Yeah, we added that in.
Yeah. But
the film, the recording is all digitally recorded.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did some artificial sound effects to heighten that too. Some of it's in mono. There is some crackling at various places. Some of it's a couple of things are out of sync. There's layers, and the upside down shot has some layers to it which were added on just for effect. And yeah, I think the sound turned out pretty good. It was done by Lav Diaz's sound recordist, sound designer, Corinne de Leon, who I'm sure would love to sound design your movie if you had a few $1,000s.
What about the use of music? Obviously, you reference last movie particularly. You got some Waylon Jennings in there.
No, they're both the songs are sung by John Buck Wilkin. And My God and I, which is the first one, is actually in the last movie with that version. It's the scene where Hopper ends up with him crying outside of the party. It's like a long tracking shot.
Okay.
And that's actually in the film. And Me and Bob McGee is also in the last movie, but this version is also by John Buck Wilkin. I came across it on the internet somewhere. It's an album he recorded, I think, in like 71 or 72, and I hadn't heard the version before. But I thought that the song, I wanted to use the song somewhere, not just because it's in the last movie, just because it's what the song is saying also. And when I heard this version, I thought that this version worked really well with that ending that we already had, because it's rhythmically it works really well. But Waylon Jennings did a version of My God and I, but John Buck Wilkin wrote it and originally recorded it.
He wrote it. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that. Well, it's interesting because Me and Bobby McGee also is in the epilogue of Brilliant Alexander Plots. I think it seems to be a song that you choose to end something or to signify something.
I think it's also the campfire sequence of Cold Water.
Oh, okay.
The SAS, and that song is costing us a lot of money.
Oh, really? There's a percussive song too, or something, some piece that.
Yeah, it's more public domain stuff. Some of it's public domain, some of it is stuff that the sound designer did.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, that's like the drums and like the sacrifice and like the sound in the bar, like the song in the background. It's her song, and I think the Mexican song was recorded was on off the radio.
Oh, okay.
And we also want to. I mean, I'd like to at some point. I'm not sure exactly, but we wanted to sort of do more narco ballads. But you know, like we had enough, paid enough for the music. I don't want to add anything else in there. But the song that she sings is also a traditional Mexican story about a weeping woman who goes down to the river to look for her children or something like that. I don't remember. We had it subtitled at a certain point, but I thought it was better not to subtitle it.
It seems like there's a sense of humor throughout, and it seems like it's a safety net to some degree, but also it could be something that makes it that much more provocative. That you could be so glib about a serious, like the end of film, the end of the world.
Sure.
At what point did that come into the story? Were you considering that this would, have a pretty strong humorous element, or even a satire, I guess you could say?
Well, I mean, it's when you try and make a film, you try to make a film that's honest to yourself, and the sense of humor. I think I have a sense of humor. Raya sometimes has a sense of humor. Alex is a very funny guy. Their interactions, I thought, were pretty funny. I mean, we didn't write any jokes for them to say or anything, but I mean, like for example, in the Chichen Itza stuff, we were there for 3 or 4 hours that day, and we were walking around, filming some stuff randomly, talking to each other, asking Alex, "What do you think was going on here?" Or he not just asking him, but he was like volunteering his natural reactions. And then when it came down to shoot that conversation, that was we just shot that once. It was pretty much what he felt. I knew that was what he was going to say, I knew that you knew that they were going to have that reaction. So, though it wasn't scripted, we had an idea that was going to come through. The jail thing, I thought, the idea of putting Alex in a jail is inherently funny. So obviously that's going to be somewhat amusing, and that we did actually, I think, 2 or 3 takes of too. Because with the campfire scene, which I think is also pretty funny, that's one where, we did two takes of that, and the first one was very much closely. I mean, that scene, the last movie ends with a campfire scene, so we also wanted to have a campfire scene, and they have a discussion about gold. I remember in the last movie, he talks about treasure to Sierra Madre, and do you know what gold feels like or looks like? So they had that kind of discussion, but it really wasn't working at all. Somehow, I think Gabino ended up talking about after the gold rush, just started singing Neil Young. And then Alex was saying, well, it's just confusing. I understand we're having this discussion. And then Alex was also complaining a bit about the freedom of that speech. I mean, I think all along he was a bit wary about the nature of the improvisation, because a lot of it was totally free.
Yeah.
Some of it was structured, some of it was less structured, some of it was more structured, depending on the situation. But then we were talking after the first take. We also had to get it, the sun was setting, so it wasn't much time. Yeah. Then I said, well, why don't we do this? Start with this beat, then you talk about the second beat, then you go to the third beat. So he had the idea, and that scene, the humor was there, was that he would talk about, first about, himself, so was the character, then about, the film that they're making, then about, the broader film that we're all making. So there was, I would say that the humor was always pretty much in our minds. Just because Mexico is also a really, surreal place. I think Dali says something like he likes Mexico because it's more surreal than his paintings. Yeah. And I'd never been to Mexico before shooting in Raya. I think Raya was there before once. And I was there for 4 days before the shoot started. But I mean, it's just you take cues from your environment also. So I don't know. I don't think we're making fun of anybody in particular. I don't think we're making fun of the country. I think actually it's quite a romantic view of Mexico, but also honest too. I mean, when we showed the film in Mexico as a work in progress, the Mexican filmmakers they liked the film, and they also liked the way that we dealt with Mexico as a place. I mean, for me also, Mexican cinema too much today, the type of cinema that one sees is too fixated on poverty and drugs and violence. And when we touch on the poverty in the film, we also touch on other aspects of Mexico. And the very beginning of the film with this Mayan festivity, I mean, this Mayan festivity is mostly, it's not done for foreigners, it's done for Mexicans. It's a festival, it was a festival in Merida, which was to celebrate Mayan culture, but for Mexicans. It's not, there weren't as opposed to Chichen Itza in the street festival. There weren't thousands of hippies walking around with dreadlocks.
Well, that's someone that's getting made fun of, the hippie, definitely. But also, you mentioned making fun of.
Well, I wouldn't say we make fun of anything,
the character
because
does,
I mean, he does, but I mean, it's a difficult scene to edit too because we wanted to enter the space and give you or the audience an opportunity to observe the space themselves, first of all, and make up your own mind as to what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you have him, giving his rant, and you could maybe agree with him or disagree with him. That doesn't matter to me. That's his viewpoint, but it's a viewpoint which he's also undercutting because, he's also dressed up like an idiot in the middle of this celebration, like a cowboy, wearing all black. And then it was also important to have just a little more room at the end for the space to exist and to be. So we shot I don't know how many hours of footage we had there, maybe 8-9 hours or something.
Is Alex's character modeled in any meaningful way after anyone? I mean, it does seem like it could potentially prickle certain contemporary filmmakers, some of their thoughts on film, particularly like using every take. Just I guess generally the musings could be seen as an indictment, maybe, or at least a friendly joke against contemporary trends.
Well, I mean, initially, the speeches that he's doing, or a lot of them are modeled on Hopper's speeches in The American Dreamer. A couple of them, I was interviewing him off camera, and he watched before we shot it, he watched the whole thing the night before, and I also had him record the entire voiceover. So actually, some of it is direct quotations from speeches that he gives. But I think also, he's very drunk when he's doing that, which was kind of important. Because The American Dream, what's interesting about the film, there are many things interesting about that film, because it's an early example of a documentary which is not purely documentary, because Hopper is credited on the film as a screenwriter of this documentary about the editing of his film, and he's completely wasted the entire time, clearly, and present himself as a complete arrogant asshole. But what Alex is saying, there's some of it is from Hopper. I think there's a lot of it is Alex is saying what Alex believes, and there's also a lot of what he's saying which I believe and which Raya believes. And we tried to edit, I think when we were editing that dialogue or editing those interviews down, we tried to nail those three things all together. And I think that, it does go over the top. I personally don't see it as parody. I mean, I can see why people might think of it as parody, and I don't actually mind that. But for me, it sort of goes beyond that and moves back into itself to become this a kind of a romanticism. And I mean, it's weird because you're essentially transplanting 70s rhetoric to contemporary world and asking if it has any authenticity, if you want to use the word authenticity. And because now people don't think that anything has authenticity. I mean, it's the same thing with people who think that the film is like a insincere or is a joke. I think maybe people just don't have the mindset now to people look at everything and think there's irony there, and there is irony in the film, but it's not. I don't think it's a totally ironic film. I think it's an honest film. I think it's it's a film which tries to present something.
Well, it could
as
be,
opposed to just satirize something.
Yeah, and it could be the fact that we're trained as spectators to find through reality television or even like a Christopher Guest film, someone talking to a camera about what they believe to be somewhat ridiculous, just at a certain level. That putting yourself in that position to pontificate, no matter what, whether maybe it's not irony, but it's just funny to hear occasionally. So it's interesting that. At what point do you think that it goes back into a kind of authenticity or a sincerity?
I think most of the stuff he says in the end is sincere.
Okay.
I think he's being sincere. I think that, like I said, I think I agree with a lot of what he's saying. I think that, sure, obviously, another reason for the speech at the end is sort of to maybe tie up some loose ends narratively, if you want to put it that way. If you as sort of a gift to the anyone who's stuck around for so long, who maybe doesn't understand what they just saw, but I don't know. I think there's something. I think there's something sincere about what he's saying, and I think that. But also the performance is something that is pretty interesting to me because, like I said, he's totally drunk. So and he still manages to deliver these somewhat intelligent observations, even if you don't agree with them. You mentioned Don Quixote. Like, if that's the kind of structure, what is the windmill that he's battling against? What is the? Oh, I don't know if that's the actual structure.
But you're right, there is a Pancho Villa kind of dynamic between the two, like, you know, going off on this adventure where you don't really know where it's going to go, having a kind of guide. Is it to like what the last film would be, or like what a film is today? Like
one I guess maybe one way of conceiving it is where I also had this idea that what would a film look like at the end of the world? What would happen if actually there was an end of the world that was coming, and there are all these forces that were. I mean, he also has more of a cosmic take on things than I do. I'm more rational, I think. He's more emotional. I'm more Alex. He's the more Gabino.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, I don't know, but I think it's like, you know, it's trying to go to, I guess you could say extremes, but not in a way that says like extremity, not like, you know, Gaspar Noé or something like that, but just pushing yourself, you know, as a filmmaker to not hold back on anything, just to keep experimenting, and to not think anything is acceptable in a film. And, you know, I guess we could have been crazier. I mean, there are concessions in the film because there is kind of a narrative, and there is kind of, it's not really an experimental film. Yeah. But I didn't think that it was necessary for it to be. I think that this was what material, and this is what happened, and it is a document. You know, it's a document of a time, of a decaying civilization, as Alex says at the beginning, or whatever the line is.
In what ways does it reflect beyond kind of the fiction, non-fiction blurring of lines, a contemporary movie making, like snapshot of what filmmaking is now or when it was made?
Well, I think that was kind of the goal, was to try and do something. I mean, you can't say my goal is just something contemporary, because I guess technically anytime you make something, you're making something contemporary. So. Yeah. But yeah, I think that there's a certain confusion that the film reflects, which is not just an aesthetic confusion, but it's also a social confusion, shall we say, or a societal confusion or cultural confusion. And then I don't think that, you know, the idea of something definitive, making something definitive and objective or whatever, didn't really interest either of us. I don't think it's interested Raya in any of his films. It doesn't interest me. Yeah. And I think that, you know, maybe the better question is what will this film look like in 15 years or in 20 years? And I don't know. I mean, that's something that the future will hold. But I mean, I think throughout the film, especially in editing, but when we were shooting it too, we really tried to think in terms of tenses, in terms of the past, the present, and the future, and how and history especially, and how history is always present in the film. And like every shot sort of has some sort of relationship between the tenses. There's probably some other tenses you could make up as well, if you want to be grammatically correct. But no, like the first three shots, like the past, the present, and the future, and then everything is sort of combined in the film, either from shot to shot or scene to scene. When you cut from in the museum of them talking, they're recorded on film. They walk into the room, and all of a sudden they're on a reverse iPhone shot. It's like a kind of time travel, which Raya is also really into, time travel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And projection.
Are you looking to make more films following this? Is this something that you're moving into, becoming more of a filmaker?
I'm just doing
more frequently?
This film right now.
Yeah? You're not considering another
No, I mean,
project?
I'm not just directing it, I produced it also, and it's a lot of work, and still a lot of work, and it's going to take up a lot of time, and I have other jobs which also take up a lot of time. It's pretty exhausting. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing that did give me the confidence that, sure. I mean, it's good. I have to say that I probably couldn't have made this film alone. That's for sure. But also, in a way, making something like this gives you confidence that you could do something which was maybe more structured if I felt like it. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I want. The idea of wanting to make more film is more like, okay, well, what kind of film would I want to make, and do I want to devote the time? What kind of ideas do you want to perceive? I mean, the first film I did was just one person handycam, very easy. This is a little more complicated. Well, this is pretty complicated actually. With, a crew of 15 people, and all these different formats and cameras in 7 days. So I don't know what it's like. And I've been on sets where you shoot more traditionally, but I don't know if that's if there's that much pleasure in doing that from my end. I mean, the film was extremely difficult to make, and it was the worst year of my life. But when we actually were shooting, it was rewarding. I think we both agree that when the cameras were actually rolling, it was rewarding. It's just getting there and getting out of there. Organizationally, it could have been a little better, but I don't regret doing it. But I'd say another film, I can't say that right now.
Were you surprised?
It's also a financial thing too. I mean, who knows? If someone wants to give me some money, maybe I'll
Yeah. Were you surprised at the reactions that happened about the potential conflict of interest over the magazine, or maybe even the programming? It seemed to some extent to come out of left field.
Well, all I can say is that the answer to that is built into the film itself. So Alex basically responds to those questions in the film. But for me, just talking generally about this whole idea of the world of film, I mean, as clear, so I made this film. I also have a magazine. I also have a film programmer. I also a film critic. I've acted in films. And for me, I consider this all to be the same thing. And I think that most people, the thing that the magazine also and that the film sort of fight is against this kind of dogmatic perception of what the world should be like. For me, it's all, like I said, this is also why I wanted to do this film. It just adds to my broader idea of understanding of what the world is. I mean, to try to comprehend the world is a hard thing to do. So we have a world which is called cinema, and to say that, okay, I'm going to be a film critic and that's all I'm going to do, you're just comprehending a very small facet of that world. It's an impossibility. You could do this, you keep on going. You can talk about distribution, you could talk about exhibition, you could talk about, and why not? But I mean, they're all related to me. You can't separate any of it, and it's exasperating because I don't know. It takes a lot of time to make a film. It takes a lot of time to make a magazine. I watch 800 movies a year for programming. I don't have much of a life outside of film. I'm very tired of it, and I could stop it very soon at any time, and it wouldn't bother me. Maybe once I reach a point where I feel like I've exhausted the limit of knowledge, or at a point where the world itself pisses me off so much that I don't want to be part of it, then I can get rid of it. But I mean, like I said, I think that in a way also the statements or the whole thing of the controversy that you're talking about, it was to a certain extent provoked, obviously.
Yeah.
And but that's also, it's just the way the film is provocative. It's not provocative in a way which is, I think, nefarious. It's provocative in a way that it should make people think about things, or consider their own place in the world, or consider their own opinions. Something like that.
Well, maybe it's the association with the concept of there being CinemaScope films that existed prior to physically making one, that there was a kind of style that one may assume would get a better or more favorable review in CinemaScope, and wouldn't it follow that if you were to make a film, it would also be featured? It makes too much sense. It's not really a conflict so much as it is if I'm regularly covering the things I like.
Well, listen, film critics should realize that they're essentially promotional vehicles for films in all cases. I'm sure people will deny that, but then they're just deluding themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the films that that we care about are films that need help to get an audience. I mean, there's absolutely not. I'm not talking about a financial benefit. I mean, I can tell you, this film, we sell this film, I'll make no money from this film. I've already lost $10,000. I'll lose more, and I'll never make the money back. Period. It's not going to happen. But I think that this is why the critics are going to programming, because programming also, to a certain extent, especially in the last 10 years, has become an extension of criticism. And also, I think a lot of critics aren't happy with the way criticism is working today and don't find it rewarding. I mean, I generally don't find it rewarding. I don't find editing a magazine rewarding anymore. I find programming much more rewarding. It's not a question of discovering films, but it's a question of, hopefully supporting films that you feel deserve an audience or deserve some chance. And the way criticism fits into that is, for me, a good criticism is criticism which helps people, understand what the film is about, or it's informationally helpful. I mean, opinions, I don't really care about opinions.
But so you don't think that there's the opportunity anymore to kind of give that platform or give that recognition to a filmmaker the way that, say, maybe I associate just like Pedro Costa with CinemaScope, like those two, just like that's where I heard that.
I think the world has changed a lot. This world has changed a lot in whatever it was, 7 years or 6 years. I mean, I think that the proliferation of resources in terms of avenues to seeing films or film festivals or online criticism, it's totally different now than it was even 7 years ago. So, I mean, certainly, I get it. I'm not saying that writing an interview with somebody in the magazine is not going to help them. Ideally, that's still why we do it. But and there always will be people that are undiscovered that need support that otherwise they wouldn't get. Sure, but I still think I'm very uncertain. I can't give any certain answers to the world that I live in now. Maybe because I'm extremely tired. Working on all of this.
When you watch it with an audience, though, does that give you a reward? Have you had that experience? I mean, you mentioned the Mexican filmmakers, but maybe just a more general.
Well, I haven't watched it with an audience. No. I mean, I watched it with a few people.
Okay.
But not in the theater. And I saw some of the press screening tables just to check the print. So I'll see it on Tuesday, and we'll see. I'm sure I won't get any satisfaction from it.
Oh, really?
I'm sure I'll be extremely nervous and.
You're not looking forward to the Q&A following the.
No, not really. No. I mean, because Raya also abandoned me here, so I'm the only one who gets crucified in public.
One thing I find interesting about this is how it fits into Raya's filmography.
Yeah.
How do you? Because you're part of it, but you're also outside of it.
You tell me how you think it fits into Raya's filmography.
I don't know how it does. That's why I'm curious to know what you, as someone, I'm sure you have a relationship with Raya, but also you're someone that watches Raya's films.
Yeah.
And can you inhabit both of those roles? Can you see this as something in his filmography?
Well, it is. So it's not.
But like as a critic or as a programmer or.
I'm too close to the film to comment on that, but I mean, like I said, you can talk about colonialism, you can talk about film history. I mean, you can talk about
the cosmic element you were mentioning. Yeah.
But I mean, I think a friend of ours who saw the film, and one of the other guys who was at the Great Cinema Party, who saw a few cuts of film and said that he's like, honestly, and he likes all Raya's films, and he's actually worked with Raya on another film too. He's like, honestly, the film to me feels like it's like a collaboration, like a complete collaboration, like. I see both of you in this film equally. Yeah. Which is something which is a bit weird, I think.
Yeah, so it goes
to me. So I mean, I know. I mean, like there's some shots there people assume Raya shot that I shot, like the tracking shot, upside down tracking shot. I shot that. We didn't have a discussion. He didn't say, and actually, I don't think he wanted to use it in the first place. There's other things that I think there's things there which are clearly more me. Maybe there are things there that are clearly more him. But I don't know. I think he also, he has good collaborators with him. The DP, his editor, sound people. So I don't know if I'm, to what extent the film is separate between the two of us. I can't attest to. I think that's up for you to decide or comprehend. But you don't see anything similar to.
I do, and I don't.
The rest of Raya's filmography.
Yeah, I do.
I think it's the most entertaining Raya Martin film ever made.
I would say it's more accessible, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. But that's just distribution as well.
Well, that's not going to be distributed. It's not.
Well, thank you, Mark.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah, we're good.
No, that's it. I can go on for hours.